Hello, welcome. My name is Nova, and today we've got something kind of special. It's a little bit of a rite of passage for book lovers and booktubers, and today I'm going to be reading my first ever advanced reader copy of a book. So that's like a half truth. I did get the arc of this book that I'm going to be talking about, but did I read it before it came out? I sure didn't. And I'm still really excited for it, and I still want to read it even if it's not in advance. And this book came out in June, I believe, so I can actually go out and get a copy of it, which excites me because this is a newer author. I loved her first book so much that I finished it and immediately requested the arc for the second one. So I'm excited to bring you on this journey as I read Conjure Island by Eden Royce. This is a middle grade novel, but the first book surprised me so much because it didn't feel middle grade. It didn't feel juvenile at all. Like, yes, the writing style was a little simpler, but it goes into like deeper topics, and I would love to talk to you a little bit further into the video about that first book, which is Root Magic by Eden Royce. And this is Eden Royce's debut. I think she'd only done like short stories before, according to the interviews that I've seen. And yeah, so a little bit later in the video, I'd love to tell you about this because this is unironically one of my favorite reads of the year. I'm so excited to read Conjure Island because while it's not a sequel, it is a spiritual successor. It deals with a lot of the same topics, which is gullah geechee root magic. Eden Royce is from South Carolina, and along the coast of North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, and maybe Florida, exists the gullah geechee, and she is from one of those islands. And as someone who is from South Carolina, when I came across this book, I was already intrigued because, like, how many books do you read that center South Carolina aside from Grady Hendrix? But yes, this was fantastic. I'll tell you about this a little bit later, but for now, the only store near me that has Conjure Island, because you know, Barnes & Noble doesn't really do hardbacks anymore. It is a Barnes & Noble, but about an hour away from me. So I am dedicated to getting this book, especially because I don't have access to the ARC anymore. But tomorrow I'm gonna get off work a little bit early. I'm gonna take the drive over there, and I already called to make sure that they had it, and they have it on hold for me. So I guess I'll talk to you after I get a hold of Conjure Island. Hello, Editing Nova here. So that night I tried to get a clip of me updating you at around 50 pages in, and Gumby would simply not let me. Hello. I can't move, but I wanted to update you on Conjure Island. I'm about 50 pages in, and ow. So we're just gonna move right along to me reading it the next day when I was out and about thrift shopping and talking about how I felt about it around the 50% mark. Hello, I've been reading Conjure Island all day, half in tandem, half on audio, but I stopped by the thrift store again because I was out and I found a bunch of stuff, so we will rapid fire. Holes. I don't know where my personal childhood copy went, so I got this for $1. Symphony for the City of the Dead apparently is about a composer in World War II, and it's nonfiction, I believe, but this cover is just so beautiful, so I'll give it a shot. I got Pachinko, which I'm nervous about because I heard it makes everyone cry. I got The Hate You Give, which I've somehow never read yet. I have a lot of catching up to do when it comes to like classic books over the past few years. And then I got this book called Lies We Sing to the Sea, and it's the Illumicrate? Yeah, it's a signed Illumicrate edition. It's So pretty. Sprayed edges. Apparently this book has a lot of controversy around it. I have no idea if I'm actually gonna end up liking this, but it was $2.50 because it was on sale, and I'd be silly to pass up a signed Illumicrate edition of something for $2.50, so we'll give it a shot. I am 50% of the way through Conjure Island. So Conjure Island is about a girl named Dell, and her immediate family is her dad, who is deployed in the military at the moment, and then her grandma. So it's just her and her grandma. They're moving for the millionth time. Dell is very self-sustaining. She's 11, but she has like the personality of like a 20-year-old because she's just had to grow up very fast and take care of her grandma, who's, you know, older, been slowing down. And so one night her grandma has a fall. I believe she had like appendicitis or something. Dell, who's just so self-sustaining, was just like, oh, I can just stay by myself. And her dad's like, no, you can't. And he's off on deployment, so they had to reach out to Dell's extended family, who Dell didn't even know existed. She thought it was just the three of them. So her dad says, hey, you're going to be flying down to Charleston, South Carolina, and you're going to spend a few weeks with your great-grandmother, who runs a school on one of the islands off of Charleston. So when she arrives, she's already a little like, because she doesn't know these people. She didn't even know they existed. But then she finds out that like magic exists, right? And so basically it's the summertime. So she's not in school at the moment, but they're doing a summer course, which is just like a very shortened like mini semester for the kids whose parents send them off to basically get a taste of conjure magic and see if this is something that they are interested in pursuing, because like if you pursue this, it's your whole life, right? Like it's gonna require a lot of studying, like a lifetime of studying. So basically Dell gets to just hop into that little summer course, which then unravels the question of why did she not know that this side of her family existed, especially if her family is so tied to conjure magic that they own a school for it. Why did she not know about that? Why did she not know that this side of the family existed? So that's kind of what she's unraveling throughout the book. On top of kind of trying to get the hang of conjure magic, she is also unraveling the mystery as to why her grandma has essentially lied to her for her entire life. And yeah, it's lovely. Eden Royce has a very strong voice, and not saying that it's like a repeat of Root Magic, but this is like a spiritual successor to Root Magic. You can tell it's by the same person. And while Root Magic was historical, it's set in the 60s, and it has much more of a focus on like family and then deeper subjects like police brutality and stuff like that. Conjure Island is much more of like a little like romp, like a magic school kind of deal, and it's modern, so this is set in modern day, but it's a lot of fun so far. I'm excited to finish this up. Dell is a great character. Dell's roommate at the magic school, Ava, is precious. I love her. The audiobook for this is fantastic. It's narrated by Bonnie Turpin, and she's having fun with it. But yeah, it's awesome. One thing about this book and Root Magic that I think is really interesting is like they are both billed as fantasy, right? And I think that there are definitely fantasy elements to these, but I think it's important to note that more so with Root Magic than this one, it's hard to say that there's a magic system, right? Because in Root Magic, it's very grounded in Gullah Geechee and like African American folk magic, which is like very real to them. So the magic system isn't made up, right? That's not the fantasy part of it. With Root Magic, it was more so maybe some of the cryptids in their folklore come to life. And then in Conjure Island, I think she has a lot more fun with like the fantasy aspects of it. Like this is definitely much more fantasy in that like there's ghosts who are the little housekeepers, and you know they have brooms instead of like wands where they can channel their magic through, and they can talk to people through water, and it's much more like typical magic and fantasy, while also a lot of these things being tied to actual practices and stuff like that. So she takes a lot of existing stuff and builds on it. I would say that Conjure Island reads, I would say like a little bit younger, but maybe because of the subject matter of Root Magic, it felt a little bit older. But either way, I don't feel like talked down to by these, and I'm really happy these exist, and I'm absolutely delighted by this. It's wonderful. What a great way to spend the day. So in the meantime, I would love to talk to you about Root Magic. So this book I ended up finding at my local library's like library sale. There's usually a few shelves right by the doors. with a library sale going on at any given time. And I walked by and this spine really like caught my eye. And so I was like, okay. And I picked it up and I just thought this cover was so beautiful. And so I picked it up for, I think, $1 or something. Ended up reading it a couple days later and I was just so taken by this. I also listened to the audiobook on Hoopla, so if this sounds interesting to you after I tell you about it, then I highly recommend listening to that or picking it up physically. So Root Magic is about two twins named Jezebel and Jay. They live off the coast of South Carolina with their mom and their uncle, and their grandmother, who they were very close to, just passed away. Their family has a long tradition of African-American folk magic, aka root magic. Basically, conflict happens, magic is involved, and it's a really interesting look at Gullah Geechee folks who embrace the folk magic and actively practice it and enjoy the practice, and Gullah Geechee folks who maybe start turning away from it. They don't see it as a viable practice, like as a job. And Eden Royce was heavily inspired by her own culture and her own family, where one person in her family actively practiced root magic and another person in her family actively disliked it. And so it was this kind of push and pull of this aspect of her culture. So this book, the blurb says, debut author Eden Royce arrives with a wondrous story of love, bravery, friendship, and family, filled to the brim with magic, great and small. I feel like that's a really good description of the themes in this book. And one thing that I loved about this so much is that, so this is set in 1963, so it's not a modern day book. This book does not shy away from the realities of being Gullah Geechee in South Carolina, the realities of police brutality against Black folks, and especially people who practice folk magic or whose livelihood depends on making and selling these potions and powders and, you know, whatever other magical stuff that you can think of. And I was just like very surprised to see that in a middle grade. I don't really have a good baseline as to, you know, how deep middle grade books go into harsher topics like this, but I mean, given the nature of the state of our country, like, I'm sure if certain people found out what this book is about, it would also be on the banned lists, which is ridiculous. But this is fantastic. I'm so charmed by these twins because they're young. Yeah, they're turning 11. And I appreciate that Eden Royce wrote them to feel very real. And sometimes in books, children are made to be kind of like blubbering idiots, while Jez and Jay really have a lot of autonomy. They have personality. They can hold a damn conversation about death and police brutality and magic and a lot of other complex themes. And this was just such a delightful find. I hadn't seen anyone talk about this, so it was kind of a gamble, but after I finished this, I ended up seeing that How to Train Your Gavin interviewed Eden Royce, and that was the most delightful thing to watch directly after reading this. And it was a great interview. There was one part where she was talking about how the editors were trying to make her change the spelling of barbecue because it's technically C-U-E, but in South Carolina, in the South, it is Q-U-E. And so she had to push back against it. I'll find the clip and slip it in here because she's so from South Carolina.
And I think my response to that was more of the, this is the reason why in South Carolina you see signs that say the letters BBQ as an abbreviation for barbecue. So I said, please do not embarrass me in these South Carolina streets by having it spelled C-U-E. Thank you very much.
Oh. That was a perfect response.
Yes, I loved this. I love Eden Royce. I'm extremely excited to see what she does with her second book. And if it has half the heart and love and pride in her culture that this does, then I'm gonna love it. So I will now return you to me reading Conjure Island. All right, I am back and I have finished Conjure Island. As expected, I thought this was so lovely. I'm gonna give it 4 stars. It didn't do anything wrong, is the thing. I enjoyed every minute that I listened to and read from this book. I think it comes down to like the tone of it and like my personal bias comparing it to Root Magic. And I don't know if it's in bad taste to compare two books that are from the same author but not part of the same series, but I think this one's more lighthearted, low stakes. She described it almost as like a portal fantasy kind of thing, because it's set on an island off the coast of Charleston that has like a barrier over it so that normal people don't know it exists. So if this one's a little more lighthearted, then Root Magic is Southern Gothic, almost like Southern Gothic but for middle grade, because it's definitely got like a more somber tone to it, and they both have shared themes of family and the culture and community and stuff like that. But this one has like a lot more stakes to it. There's like a genuine feeling of like impending danger when it comes to this one. And this one is just more like unraveling family history kind of thing. So I think it just comes down to which vibe I prefer. And I think I just prefer the vibe of Root Magic more, but that's just like personal taste. This one felt more middle grade, while Root Magic is middle grade, but it didn't always feel it because of the topics that it covers. And this never talked down to me at all or anything. I genuinely enjoyed it, but I think without those stakes and the kind of darkness to it, it's harder to forget that it's middle grade, if that makes sense. But I loved this. I loved what it had to say about all of the traditions. I loved what it had to say about why normal people don't know about this kind of magic and how it's kind of purposeful. Like they keep it very self-contained for a reason. And I loved all the bits where it's teaching you about these spells and the history behind like the brooms and the symbolisms and all that kind of stuff. Is just really, really cool to me. And I'm really happy that there is a Gullah Geechee author putting these stories out, because like for me personally, like I grew up in North Carolina, went to like high school and a little after high school in South Carolina, and lived in Atlanta, so Georgia. And I was a frequenter of Charleston, and I learned way too late that the Gullah Geechee folks existed that close to me. Like it, to the point where it like made me angry when I found out that I just didn't know. I watched Gullah Gullah Island a little bit when I was growing up, but like not enough for it to really stick aside from like the name. And it's just infuriating, and I think it speaks to the education system that I lived in all of these states, all of which have ties to Gullah Geechee culture, and I knew nothing about it. And that's part of the reason I was also drawn to Ring Shout. This also follows the Gullah Geechee folks in Georgia, I believe, Savannah. And while tonally this could not be more different because this is a horror novella, there's still a lot of similarities there. And so weirdly enough, when I've told people about this, I'm like, this is strangely a good pairing. One is an adult horror novella and the other is a middle grade Southern Gothic fantasy. But I just think it's very cool. I'm really glad that I'm finding more information about this culture and learning about the different aspects of the magic that they use, the history behind them, the very direct ties to Africa because of the slave trade. And there's an interview where Eden Royce was talking about the reason the Gullah language sounds so much like Haitian Creole is because they come from the same place essentially. And yeah, it's so good. I thought this was so lovely, and I'm really happy I got around to finally reading it. Thank you to NetGalley for sending me the ARC months ago. I'm sorry I didn't get around to reading it then, but I have read it now and can confirm it was a delight. I will read anything Eden Royce puts out. I believe she has one more middle grade coming out, a young adult coming out, and she's gonna dip her toes into adult horror in the next couple of years, and I'm so excited for that. But yeah, thank you for watching this little journey with me. Thank you for listening to me gush about Root Magic. Give it a shot if you haven't read it and if you're interested in it. Even if you don't read middle grade, I really, really do recommend it. And between the two, I would start with Root Magic. I think between the two, this one is going to appeal to a wider audience. It's a really good starting point. And then if you end up liking this, then I would definitely pick up Conjure Island. You know, spiritual successor. It's not a sequel, but they feel like sisters, not twins, if that makes sense. Anyway, thank you again for watching. I'm extremely excited for the next video because in the spirit of Root Magic and Conjure Island, I'm gonna be reading 3 middle grade books that I found when I went to go get Conjure Island that really caught my eye, that I've heard great things about. And yeah, we're gonna have a little magical middle grade moment. So subscribe for more. I've kind of got my next couple months planned out reading wise. I think I planned out until end of November because I'm just really excited for some of the themed reading vlogs I'm gonna be doing. So stick around if you're interested in seeing that. Thank you again for watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.